Welcome back to Politics here on France 24. On the set today, Christian Macarian, managing editor of the news weekly L'Express, Philip Turle from Radio France Internationale, John Keating, correspondent for Kuwait's Kuna agency and the president of the Anglo-American Press Association. We've discussed François Hollande's presidency in the first half. Now the question is, what will the government be able to do in those dire economic times? And one word that's not been pronounced by the president, the prime minister, or the ministers is the word rigueur, which translates as austerity. And here's how François Hollande managed to deal with the issue, or didn't manage to deal with the issue, during a so-called social conference this week in Paris.
We have to regain some sovereignty, some independence vis-à-vis the financial markets and our needs to finance our collective spending. This is not a choice in favor of austerity, but in favor of sovereignty.
So, sovereignty, not austerity, well...
Call it what you like. The bottom line is, we're all going to have to cough up the money and there's going to be an austerity plan. They are terrified of the word austerity, and not only François Hollande is terrified of it, Nicolas Sarkozy was also terrified of it. And the problem with the word austerity, or rigueur as they say in France, is that they think that if they use that word, people are going to go, oh my goodness me, we're going to have to pay more money, let's vote for the other side. So we'll come up with some flowery kind of way, a patriotic contribution to the recovery of the country. In other words, austerity. And the time will come when, whether they like it or not, they're going to have to face facts and call it austerity, I think. But they will try their hardest to turn it around so that people think it's not really austerity. There's a funny thing about France, and I've heard this said by lots of people, is that France seems to be in this remarkable position, whereas they're in the middle of Europe, and Europe is affected by this enormous global financial crisis, and France somehow has managed to escape from it. There is no crisis in this country. We're not really affected like Italy, Spain, Greece, Ireland, all the other countries around us. We've managed to escape. Just like the Chernobyl cloud came as far as the borders of France in 1986, but miraculously didn't actually get over the border into France. That is how the government would like us to see things. So that's why they're not saying the word austerity. The bottom line is, though, it is austerity. People are going to have to pay. The government has an easy job this year, I think, or easier job trying to come up with the money, about 7 billion euros they need to balance the books. Next year, it's going to be very difficult, and that's where we're going to see how much of a real policy they've got and how much of a backbone they've got to introduce these measures and keep their support if they can.
John Keating, aren't they, though, the socialist government, already trying to prepare the ground for some painful measures? Some polls have shown that the French understand that they will need to swallow a bitter pill, or do you think they're still hesitating about what to do?
I think actually people don't know what's coming, and that's part of the problem. But austerity is an ugly word in France. I mean, it's a cultural thing. You can't be austere in a country where they like to have a good time and to be gay and enjoy themselves. Austerity denotes clamping down and holding down in a dark place and not having fun. So no one wants to pronounce the word austerity. There's a second point that if they do pronounce the word austerity, the psychological impact in the state of austerity is people will not spend money. The French are extraordinarily good savers of money. 17% is the savings rate in France. So if people, that could go up to 20%, 25% of people believe hard times are ahead. So they won't spend money, and the French economy counts enormously on consumption. Consumption is one of the motors of the French economy here. And if that goes bad, because it's still very good despite the crisis, if that goes bad, well, then we're in real trouble. There are measures underway. They're going to increase payroll taxes. They're going to do certain things. Middle class are going to get hard hit. The upper class, who earn over 1 million euros a year, the 75% tax rate, that's only a very small percentage of the population. But the people who will get hit are the middle class. They're going to have to pay. And they will try and save as much as possible on social. There will be a reform of the social network, the social welfare system. Ayrault, the Prime Minister, is already talking about they'll have to find another way to fund the social welfare system in France. It can't just be on payroll taxes alone. There'll have to be other way.
Right. So higher taxes. Clearly, the government and the president had said or indicated that there would be higher taxes, but it would hit mostly the rich. But now, John, if I'm following you correctly, it seems that everyone is going to get hurt. And if you're a socialist president and a socialist government, that could mean trouble.
Yes, that's their choice. There could have been another choice that would have been to cut significantly the public expenses. That was not their choice, and it's a very socialist approach. Once again, after 2 months, I would be careful, and I would talk about general impression more than precise things. The general feeling I have is that this government tries again and again to reconcile socialist promises and the reality. And they are still in this phase. They are not in the action phase, not yet. And I think we are losing a lot of time. The crucial choices are not clear, except this general choice. Yes, we don't want to cut the public expenses. We don't want to reduce the number of civil servants significantly. We prefer to raise the taxes. Okay, it's a solution, but there is another problem. It's the solution that gives a priority to the consumption, as you said. There is a problem with consumption for France, a very precise problem. It's that we have a very bad commercial balance, as you know. And the more you consume inside the country, the more you import. Due to our situation, which is very critical on this, in this field, I think this will worsen the situation in commercial terms. That is going to disbalance again our exchanges with Germany, for instance. And this is a very bad choice. Choosing to raise the consumption in the situation we are objectively is not a good thing. And I think they know it because they have very good experts like Jean-Pierre Jouyet, like Pierre Moscovici, like the socialists have a very good staff, you know. So I think that their choice is once again not clear. And I think that François Hollande is still in a phase of is very dubious on the final solution.
You wanted to react.
Just to come in on trade, you're right. And Hollande has made it clear that he wants fair trade conditions with countries where we're importing a lot of stuff. Like China, for instance, he wants fair trade. He wants a proper environment on both sides to have a fair trade practice so that there isn't an unfair advantage to countries like China and India where we're...
Okay, but there is another problem, is the way they use rhetorics. It's very French, I know, but what means sovereignty against austerity? I personally don't understand. Sovereignty applies to international relationship, not to a social context. So they're trying to... François Hollande, from my point of view, behaves still as a political leader, as the chief of the Socialist Party.
It's a protectionist discourse, that sovereignty over our stuff. It's protectionist when you think of Europe and also the world trade.
But
I want to ask you though. You may want to react, but I just wanted to throw this in. You said earlier people don't want to say austerity because there might be elections. There are no elections until 2014. The socialists have an absolute majority in the National Assembly. They have a majority in the Senate. They control. Isn't it maybe the time to say we might be unpopular, but that's the time to do it?
Okay, that is what they're going to have to say. I think they want to keep their popularity rate. He wants to be Mr. Nice Guy for the moment. I was elected, thank you very much. I'm going to be nice and everything will be fine and dandy. That's okay for the time being. The bottom line is that, the state coffers are empty. They need to find 7 billion euros for this year and 25 billion euros for next year. Okay, this year they've just about sussed out how they're going to do it. Next year they really don't know for the moment. Secondly, there's no growth in this country. Growth in the first semester of 2012 was 0. So there's not enough money coming in, or no money coming in, to fill those state coffers to keep the balance going. So they have to find the money somewhere. So what's the alternative? They've got two alternatives. Either A, they increase taxes, and that's going to undermine growth, or B, they cut public spending. They said they're not going to cut public spending, so they're going to have to increase taxes. He's increased the minimum wage by 2%, whereas in 1981, François Mitterrand increased it by 20%. But already there's another problem which the government's got to face, and that is that employment costs too much money in this country. Every time you hire someone in this country, you have to pay not only their wage, but the same amount again in taxes to keep your company running. So people can't afford to take more people on. So the unemployment rate is going up. All of these questions need to be sorted out. And the government said, well, we're going to increase income tax for the rich people. We'd like to put taxes on financial transactions, but we're not going to tax the lower categories, which is actually not true, because they're going to introduce taxes in all sorts of different domains, which are going to penalise those who earn the least. Maybe their income tax rate might not go up, but there are even signs now that the VAT rate in France might have to be increased, and that, of course, will affect everybody.
Right. There's this notion also that during this big social, they don't like the word summit, because this is how Nicolas Sarkozy used to call them. So they called it a conference, government, the unions, the bosses' union. François Hollande also mentioned that the cost of labor indicated was a problem, although during the campaign, this was basically a Nicolas Sarkozy argument. So again, the question is, aren't they quietly shifting their position, and maybe will we end up doing more or less what Nicolas Sarkozy has been doing?
Absolutely. I mean, the math is very clear. If you look at labor costs in Germany compared to France, there's a 20% difference. You can't live with that. You can't be competitive with that. Nobody's going to want to set up a company here. The goods you produce, even if it's the same, are 20% higher. No one's going to want to buy them from you. They'll buy them from Germany. So, I mean, there has to be something done. And Ayrault said in his speech at the social conference that there's going to have to be something done about competitiveness and finding a different way of financing the social system, but not exclusively through payroll taxes.
Right.
So where Hollande has won a point, I think, on an international front and the European front, is that he was the one who came up with this idea that we can't keep bringing in austerity plans for the European Union, especially places like Greece, Italy and Spain, because if we hit them too hard with too many taxes to pay back the money they owe, they're never going to have any growth and it'll just collapse. And he seems to have won quite a lot of support on that, much to the anger of Angela Merkel, but certainly from the United States, they said that was a good idea. The United Kingdom thought that what he came up with is a good idea, and that seems to have paid off up to a point in his relationship with the rest of Europe. And even Angela Merkel seems to have given in on one or two issues since François Hollande was elected. So he's won some support in that domain. But here in France, the situation is very difficult, and there's no real easy way out for the moment.
It's a contradiction, though. I mean, the idea of increasing taxes will stifle growth. It will slow down activity. And on the other hand, what Hollande is saying, he wants to give a boost to growth. But where's this going to come from? I mean, if internally we're increasing taxes and stifling growth.
Right. Well, there might be European funds.
From the 210 billion they're going to have from Brussels, I mean, that's not going to do it.
It will come from rhetorics, only. And I think it's, once again, it shows that there is no decision. And François Hollande, who is very competent, because if you remember the long list of presidents we had during the Fifth Republic, we never had a man as competent as François Hollande, because he's working in a Supreme Court of Public Accounts, and he knows very well the notion of public spending. He knows very well the situation. I think he can do something very interesting for this.
But could he challenge the unions, for example, telling civil servants will have to freeze maybe your salaries, or
his method during the conference, the social conference, is interesting. Sarkozy created a very tough confrontation with the unions, and it was a disaster. So I think what Hollande does on this field is interesting. He wants to convince the unions to help him to find a solution. This is a very social democrat approach.
It's a German model.
This is interesting. It's exactly the German model. This is very German, yes. The context is completely different in France.
The economy is not Germany.
If there is a man able to change the the social context, it is François Hollande. I think he can do it. So I wouldn't criticize him on what he makes on the social front. I think it's interesting.
But is consensus and compromise the French way?
Yes.
Can it become the French way?
Absolutely. But in terms of economic theory, there is a problem. There are too many contradictions, and there is no decision. You know, investment, as you said, we are a big saving country, and investment is more important for the competitivity, for the general shape of the companies than consumption. I'm sorry, but
right. Philippe, just as a conclusion, do you think that Hollande, although it might not be his personality, his attitude until now, could be more assertive and saying, okay, everyone, I've looked at the numbers, I'm an expert, as Christian just said, there's no other way, we have to do this, including cutting spending, because there's no other way?
Something you need to know about François Hollande. He's president of France. He's always been described as Mr. Nice Guy. They call him Flamby, someone who can't make a decision, someone who dithers. But underneath it all, there's a shark. There's a man who's very sharp. He knows exactly what he's doing. And if he has to say something, then he will do it. And believe you me, even if you're Mr. Nice Guy, Mr. Normal, if you're going to be president of France, you can't be a nice guy and get to do that job. So if he's going to have to come out with the statement to say, this is what we're going to do, these are the efforts you're going to have to make, and you've got no choice, he will do it. He's pushing it back as long as he can, but that moment is going to have to come, and I suspect is coming after the summer vacation is over.
Okay, we'll see if what you said becomes the truth for France, and if Mr. Normal becomes Mr. Shark. Thank you to all of you, and we'll see you after the summer recess here on Politics.